Good morning. This is Africa Business Radio, and we'll be having an interview session with Taya and Limo all the way in Kenya on the topic sustainable and scalable innovation in Africa. Good morning, Taya. Good morning, Limo.
Good morning. How are you?
Hi, morning.
How you doing? How you doing?
It's been great. We're doing great.
All right. Okay.
Innovating around podcasting at the moment.
Yeah, right. So let's move into the interview, please. So first of all, I'd like us to look at the current innovation blocks in Africa. What blocks are running right now?
So we have three major blocks. We have institutions of higher learning, which basically means university, colleges, and the likes. We have incubators, co-working spaces and hubs, which provide homes for startups. And then we have local enterprises, which also include startups that have been in the ecosystem for long periods of time, over 10 years, like Africa Stalking itself, and hardcore businesses like Safaricom, for example, in Kenya. All these kind of like add up into the local enterprise market.
So how do these blocks incorporate, the concepts of viability, of sustainability, and of course of scalability? First off, viability, how is it incorporated into these blocks?
So viability is something that I would say is slightly lacking, but could be added into the platform, into these blocks themselves. So you kind of look at institutions of higher learning. For a long time, they've been too focused on trying to get as many graduates as possible out of the university, instead of kind of trying to think through, instead of trying to place people into jobs, how do we help them brand new jobs, right? And that's what's supposed to make universities viable. They're knowledge centers for any nation or any continent. So what we need to kind of think about is, for institutions of higher learning, how do we make them our knowledge hubs, where we find out what's the best way to run a business, what's the best way to run a government, all these facets of knowledge should come from there. And when you look at, for example, incubators, co-working spaces, and all these hubs, the goal here is to nurture these ideas that have been brewed within the institutions of higher learning and test them out. They become like experiment spots. We get to find out, okay, is this the best way to build a business? Should we follow the Silicon Valley model? Should we follow the Chinese model? Should we look into our past to try and find out how innovation happened back then? That's kind of like the role of the hub. It contributes to culture, contributes to the idea of experimentation. While local enterprises are the engines for all of this happening, because at the end of the day, all of these activities that we're talking about in the institutions of higher learning, as well as the hub and the working spaces, need someone to provide these resources. So local enterprises often have capital to do this. They have experienced personnel who can come in and actually help these people, and also they are the ones who can absorb the talent coming out of all these places. For example, in Africa, because we haven't focused too much on investing in STEM, we end up often struggling in areas of research. We struggle heavily, even in the computer science field. It's no longer the institutions of higher learning that are providing the tools for tech. It's now these out-of-the-box kind of guys. When you look at MEST, you look at Moringa School, Andela, these have become the new hubs of knowledge, especially for tech. But ideally, it should exist in the institutions of higher learning, and the incubators and hubs just help us make this happen.
Right. So, just to add on to what Limo said, I think in terms of sustainability, blocks like local enterprise actually supporting businesses to become profitable. You're actually taking away from kind of dependent thinking, dependent financing, and that is kind of, by them being able to become profitable and their businesses to grow and scale, they're able then to kind of feed back to the ecosystem, and that helps to drive further innovation. And that's what keeps different ecosystems sustainable, that you're not depending on funding or investor support or angel support, because businesses are able to run on themselves, and they feed back in later on into the ecosystem.
Right. So you mentioned in one of the innovation blocks, which is the incubator, co-working spaces and hubs, right, where the experimentations and all of that take place. Now, can this happen in the institutions of higher learning? I mean, so many persons worry these days that, a lot of practicals and experiments do not take place in the institutions. Can it be imbibed somehow, from the hubs straight up to the institutions before it gets down to the second block? Is that possible? Would that make it better, more sustainable?
Yeah, I think it's very possible for the universities to kind of still perform this function.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd give some examples. Is like the USIU here in Kenya, United States International University. They have their own innovation center built out, but this is like completely. It's a bit separated from the education platform itself. This is more to support this new ways of thinking. It allows for the experimentation. For when we say institutions of higher learning should be experimenting, they should be experimenting with ideas, with coming up with the new ideas. But the hubs work on the implementation side. How do you actually make this work in real life? So the ideal situation would be institutions of higher learning producing these incredible knowledges around. This is what we're thinking about. This is how we kind of think the whole system should run.
Mm-hmm.
But then the hubs take up these ideas and go like, okay, let's try this out. Let's see if we changed how startups are formed in Africa. Instead of having 2 founders, we use 8 founders. Would that change something about how businesses are built? So hubs are the fantastic places to kind of try this out in real life. No longer test runs, but rather like MVPs, proper executions of these ideas.
Just to add on to that, I think definitely the two things are not mutually exclusive. I think they all fit into or are the same piece, they kind of fit into each other.
Okay.
A really good case in point would be in Boko University in Botswana. I had the pleasure of meeting some of the team last year, and they're actually running like a mini incubator.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole reason for doing that is even though they would not be able to implement some of these ideas to full scale, which is what would happen in hubs and, full-blown incubators, what they do is they kind of help to act as a bridge for the kind of more technical, the knowledge base that the universities and the courses, teach students, teach, budding entrepreneurs. But then it also gives them like this test space to actually, to start thinking about business plans, about those, beginning with the end in mind. That let's say you have an idea, you think that, I want to go and kind of, test it out in an incubator. Some of these universities are actually giving them, this kind of pre-incubate phase, and it allows them to actually see firsthand what are the things that we need to start thinking about, or if I need to start thinking about as a founder, or as a co-founder, as a CTO, that's going to be able to help my idea not only become viable, which is what we discussed, but also, become successful or to be able to be executed and implemented successfully once it gets to the kind of incubator or hub level. So I don't think it's mutually exclusive. It's more like one is a preamble to the other.
Right. Beautiful. I mean, I totally understand now. It's like, more like a hierarchy. It has to go on first from the institutions of learning, and then where you get to experiment in the co-working space and hubs, and then all the way down to the local enterprises. Now, please, how do these blocks now incorporate, scalability into the entire journey of innovation?
Well, when you're looking at how we can make this not only sustainable but scalable, it has to form this cyclic model. Each of these players have to talk to each other. Currently, what's happening is that incubators are doing their own things, forcing them to start teaching courses and start working extra hours away from what they're supposed to be doing. It's also forcing them to go take ridiculous steps, kind of like get foreign investments in. And what's eventually happening is that you look at, for example, this year we got $2.3 billion of foreign direct investment into Africa. The majority of that money was coming from the West, was coming from the East. Very little of it was actually coming from local enterprises, local investors rather. So what we want to the kind of idea that we are trying to push is that can all these people sit in the same room and kind of trying to figure out how we can extract value from each other and make sure we can all thrive. And that brings us to the cyclic model. So academic institutions can provide skilled labor to local enterprises, while at the same time the local enterprises can actually provide funding, training, and infrastructure that allows the academic institutions to train the right way. The way academic institutions work with incubators, that the academic institutions create these business models and ideas, and training and incubation facilities are provided by the incubators and the hubs. So this allows all of them to kind of have like a really good, really interesting relationship where it's a win-win situation, and no longer the big companies are showing up to universities, picking out the best talents, and in the process taking out the people who should be doing the research.
Right.
You look at for local enterprises and how they work with incubators. I think the goal for any incubator or hub is to see the startups in their space end up becoming large companies, hopefully the next unicorn. That's what everyone is hoping for.
Right.
But at the same time, how resources to actually make that happen are often quite ridiculous. So you need these enterprises to provide, especially funding, to allow these businesses to grow and become what they're supposed to be.
Right.
And just sum up for us, the way we see this is that this should be a win-win situation. So if we played one party in this cyclic funnel ends up getting hurt in the process, and currently in Africa, it's the academic institutions that are hurting the most. Incubators following closely, and the local enterprises may not see it at times, but they are really struggling because because of the broken funnel, we now struggle with finding the right talent for the new jobs that are coming up. There are enough software engineers right now anywhere in the world. We're still seeing a large need for new jobs, UI UX engineers. We are looking at guys like I can't even explain how many jobs are being created that we cannot fill, simply because the schools are still struggling to kind of manage to teach all these people within very tight budgets. The incubators and hubs are also running around trying to get investment for their startups, and in the process, so many people are falling out of the loop. Yet we could actually build something quite incredible here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Just to add on to what Limo said, the idea about that kind of cyclical system is really to remove duplication of effort, because I think, like he said, a lot of people or different blocks are ending up replicating what other actors in the system are doing.
True.
And so we're actually, losing out in terms of optimizing limited resources, because I think even in terms of the that's being invested on the continent, it's still very skewed to particular sectors. It's still very skewed to, particular startups or certain founders. And so we really need to think about what are these blocks? How do we optimize for these resources? And then I would say the other thing around scalability is about leveraging off of partnerships. So I think recently you saw, CC Hub acquired the iHub, and just automatically because of that acquisition, that kind of strengthened partnership, startups based at the hub will now have greater visibility into West Africa, vice versa. And so that will dramatically increase, the opportunities for these particular startups to grow and actually grow beyond just, the domestic or your geographical location. The other thing that I would say is scalability really kind of in tune with increased collaboration. So I think recently Village Capital announced the kind of Gen Ecosystem Build for Africa 2020, this new program. And so what they have brought is actors, from the incubation space, from the co-working space, from different hubs, from, the enterprise section and the corporate world, because you've got people from GSMA, you've got really high-level VCs. And so creating this forum for increased collaboration will actually really play a key part, I think, in helping a lot of the startups to scale, and also, innovation as a concept as well.
Right. Huge plans you have here, really huge plans. I mean, I was going to come to the part of, funding and, what these institutions need to do to spur all of this, viable and scalable and, sustainable innovations you spoke about. But then this is just a part one of this interview session. We'll be having another one much later. Thank you very much, Limo and Tanya, for joining us in the show this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Do have a nice day.
All right. Thank you too. Bye.
Bye.